Ruskies. Just like normal people everywhere, they do not want war. Putin calls himself the savior of the Russian homeland. Putin figures he can take land as long as Russia is not at war. The Maidan happens. Putin, who was a KGB agent during the collapse of the USSR, knows all about the chaos that a change of government can have. So, he plans accordingly. The Yanukovych government in Ukraine fails. Within a few days, Putin sends his military to take over all the important buildings in Crimea. Ukraine didn't fight for Crimea. Putin says,
"Excellent,"
and tries to duplicate the Crimean success in the Donbass. Ukraine fights back in the Donbass. Russian soldiers are captured in Ukraine, confirming the Kremlin had begun a partial invasion. Putin justifies the Russian troops in Ukraine by saying they are needed to help their fellow Russians liberate the land. Putin, the savior of the Russian homeland, now cannot back out of Ukraine without running the risk of looking weak and losing power. So he increases his support for the separatists. Russian-backed separatists shoot down Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. 300 civilians die in the plane crash alone. Putin blames all the deaths on Ukraine, which puts more pressure on him to achieve a victory. Russia supplies a new offensive. Hundreds of Russians die for a small piece of land, but Ukraine would take all the land back within a month. With every disappointment on the battlefield, Putin had to find a larger and larger scapegoat to maintain his grip on power. That is, until Putin finds a friend in former US President Donald Trump.
He just said it's not Russia. I will say this, I don't see any reason why it would be.
As long as Trump trusted Russia and was causing rifts in NATO, Putin would have the luxury of putting the conflict in Ukraine on hold. Never interrupt your enemy while they're making a mistake. While action on the battlefield relaxed, the rhetoric and misinformation intensified. By 2021, Russian propagandists had convinced their population that Ukraine was now run by Nazis. Putin, the savior of the Russian homeland, cannot allow Russians to live under Nazi rule anywhere in the world. So Putin begins his full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Once again, Ukraine fights back. Thousands of Russians die as the military fails to take Kyiv, leaving a 60-mile-long convoy of broken Russian equipment snaking through the Ukrainian backcountry. Putin justifies the retreat from Kyiv by claiming it was a planned action and intended to give Ukrainians room to negotiate. When negotiations didn't happen because that was a lie, Putin accuses Zelensky of being untrustworthy, making it difficult, if not impossible, for Putin to ever tell his people that he will negotiate with Zelensky in the future. The West will not negotiate without Ukraine, and Putin cannot negotiate with Zelensky without losing face in the Russian public. So, more fighting, and more dying. Putin justifies the slow pace by accusing the US and other Western allies of fighting in Ukraine. But that also makes Putin look weak if he cannot defeat the wolf at his doorstep. So Putin orders more attacks, and Russia orders more coffins. Ukraine counterattacks and gains land in Kharkiv and Kherson. Putin excused the losses by claiming the West is using bioweapons in Ukraine. But this justification only increases the urgency for Russians to win the war. It also might be a justification for future wars against the West, so look out for that. The army once again goes on the offensive. Russians die for minimal gains. So Putin tries to justify the losses by saying, Ukraine has genetically engineered super soldiers. Yeah, I'm not joking. Every failure is excused. Every excuse is an escalation. Putin, at this point, cannot just stop the war in Ukraine. Even if he wins and takes the whole country, he has built such a boogeyman out of the West that he will look weak if he does not continue to fight. But Russia has no chance of winning a war against NATO. Unless...
No, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You gotta pay. You gotta pay.